Welcome to another video from HH Miniatures. I'm Charles, and today I will be teaching you how to make forest bases. This basing method is perfect for any army centered around a forest, or you can also build a bigger version of it as scatter terrain or as a diorama or display. The main inspiration behind this project is the forests that we have in Canada. I went to a local park behind my house to gather some bark. Bark is a great material for this project because its shape resembles a slated rock. You want to collect bark and leave it out to dry in the sun for a few days, as the bark needs to be dry before you can glue or paint it. Typically using just tree bark as a foundation is enough, but if you want to take it one step farther, I would recommend using corkboard. Now here is a cork coaster that I got from IKEA, as well as a wine cork. And essentially you take a hobby knife or a plier and you want to cut it down to small pieces, and this mixed in with the bark will give your rock a variety of textures and shapes. For the filler, I've used lightweight spackle that I got from a local hardware store. It can also come in tubes. Any sort of wall filler will do. Now for the vegetation, there's no extensive list of products you have to use. I would recommend you to take a look at your collection to see what you have. I'll be going over what I used. Feel free to take any ideas from this and make it your own. The main flock that I used was Gale Forest 9's Dirt Flock. I like the dark tone of it for the forest floor. I've also used a little bit of coarse grit, also from Gale Forest 9. This is perfect for the forest floor as well. I've also used little pieces of wood, as well as Woodland Scenics Foilage. I used two different shades here, just to break up some monotony in the colors of my bushes. And finally, I have some moss from Michael's. You can find this at any sort of craft store. This kind of moss is great because it's already dry when you buy it, and the variety of shades in the moss resembles real-life bushes. Tufts are also something that's really common when it comes to basing. There are dozens and dozens of companies that sell different types of tufts, and it's a good idea to mix them up here for a forest. You can also find a variety of plants that are brass etched. Here you see ivy and ferns. I ended up picking the ferns for this project just because I like them a little bit better, and also the forests surrounding my house contain a lot of ferns, and that is the landscape I'm trying to recreate. Ferns also are sold in a laser cut form. These ones are typically a little bit smaller, perfect for armies and bases that are smaller. Okay, now that we have all our supplies ready, let's start building the base. To start, you want to break apart your bark and your cork into little pieces. Start by piling and stacking the pieces of cork and bark on the base. It might take a little while to find a combination that you like. If the pieces are too big or do not fit, feel free to trim them down a little bit so that they fit with each other. It took me a few minutes to get the rock into a shape that I was happy with, as I wanted this to look realistic, but at the same time a little bit more elevated, as it was for a hero in my army. Finally, when you're happy with how the rock formation looks, glue it all together with super glue. Once the super glue has dried, it is time to apply the filler. Here I've used an old brush to apply some spackle. You want to try to cover most of the recesses and the cracks between the rock and the base, and also between the pieces of cork and bark. But you also want to leave a few cracks showing, as naturally rock will have cracks in them in real life. Give it about a half an hour for the filler to dry, and then I began applying grit to the base, little rocks with super glue, to break up the forest floor texture. To show this basing method at a larger scale, I've also gotten a big piece of bark to create a diorama piece for my fellowship. Here you see I've done the same with the spackle. Okay, now on to the painting. So to start, you want to prime your bases black. You can use a normal primer. In my case, I've mixed some cheap craft store paint with Mod Podge. Alternatively, you can use white glue. When you mix the two at about a 50-50 ratio, it effectively becomes a primer. And once dried, it will make the paint hold really well onto the terrain. So I actually prefer this over a can primer or airbrush primer. Once the primer has dried, you want to coat the rock with a dark brown. Here I've airbrushed some burnt umber from Vallejo, but any sort of dark brown paint will work. Now once the brown has dried, you want to dry brush a mid-tone gray over the rock. Here I've used Citadel's Dawnstone gray, and you want to do a very heavy dry brush and cover most of the brown areas. And only leave the brown in the very deep recesses of the rock. Once the gray has dried, you want to do a wash of Nuln Oil all over the rock. This will darken the colors that we painted previously. After about 45 minutes, the wash should be dried. And next we will be dry brushing with Ulthuan gray from Citadel. This is a very bright gray, almost white. You want to dry brush very lightly and only pick out the most raised areas of the rock. And now for the basing. I've gone with Mod Podge again as the glue that I will be using for the flock. So the first thing we're going to do is cover the forest base with Mod Podge. So any area that is going to be ground. So this includes the bottom of the base and also any elevated flat areas that you think plant would likely grow. Once this is done, you want to apply the dirt flock or any equivalent of what you want your forest floor to look like. After the forest floor has been based, it is time to apply the static grass. So here I've put some Mod Podge over portions of the forest floor and taken some Army Painter steppe grass. I really like this shade of static grass as it matches the color of the dirt flock really well. You can also put some static grass into cracks of the rocks, as in nature we do see grass growing out of cracks and other unusual narrow spots in the forest. Next, I added ferns to the display. So here I've used a hobby knife to remove it from the sprue. Once the ferns are removed from the sprues, you can shape them and bend them to any shape you want with pliers. And in this case, I've kind of bent them in slightly different directions so it looked more natural. I then started applying different tufts and the rest of the vegetation that I had in my collection and spread them out over the display piece. This is actually my favorite step of the process. It's actually a lot of fun, just picking out where you want each of the pieces to go. And once everything is dried, it is essentially complete. You can take it one step further by applying leaves. I happen to have these ones from MIG, and I've done the same here, just applying the leaves in clusters over the terrain piece to give it a little bit of variety. And that's it. Your forest base and forest display base are now complete. Now it is up to you how much vegetation, how many bushes you want to add, and how dense you want your forest to look. The final step now is to add the miniature onto the base. In this case, it is Gandalf the Grey for me. I hope you enjoy this tutorial on how to create a forest base and a forest display. If you found this tutorial to be helpful, please like and share to help this video reach more people. And subscribe to this channel for more videos. Thank you for watching. Once again, I'm Charles from HH Miniatures.